Welcome to Research Expert Solutions. In this course, we're going to break down and simplify the Zambia Employment Code Act of 2019. The goal is to help everyone understand the law in a way that's clear and easy to follow, whether you're educated or not. We'll take you through the key parts of the Act, explaining the most important things you need to know about employment laws in Zambia. By the end of this course, you'll have a good grasp of what the law says and how it affects you as an employee or employer. Let's dive into the first part of the Act, Preliminary Provisions. In this session, we'll be covering the following sections from Part 1, Preliminary Provisions. 1. Short title and commencement. 2. Application. 3. Interpretation. 4. Compliance with other laws. 5. Non-discrimination at undertaking. 6. Protection of persons with disabilities. 7. Prohibition of casualization. 8. Prohibition of forced labor. Stay tuned as we break this down in simple, easy-to-understand language. This law was officially signed and became active on April 11, 2019. It's available for purchase from the government printer, if you want your own copy. But don't worry, we're here to break it down for you in simple terms. So, what is this act all about? Well, it's designed to regulate employment in Zambia. That means it sets rules and guidelines for how people should be hired, how they should be treated at work, and what rights they have as employees. One of the key points is that it prohibits discrimination in the workplace. No one should be treated unfairly because of their background or personal characteristics. The law also creates something called the Skills and Labor Advisory Committees, which are groups responsible for advising on issues related to skills development and employment. It also spells out how contracts of employment should be formed and enforced. This ensures that there are clear agreements between employers and employees, and these agreements are protected by the law. It's not just about contracts, though. The Act also lays out the entitlements and benefits that employees should get, such as wages, leave, and other conditions of work. Speaking of wages, there are strong protections to make sure that employees are paid fairly and on time. Another important aspect of the Act is the registration of employment agencies, which are businesses that help people find jobs. These agencies need to be properly registered and regulated to ensure they operate fairly. The law also regulates the employment of children and young persons to protect them from exploitation and to make sure they are not doing work that is harmful or interferes with their education. It also provides for the welfare of employees at workplaces, ensuring that conditions are safe and healthy. In addition, the Act lays down employment policies, procedures, and codes that employers must follow to ensure fairness and compliance with the law. Finally, this 2019 Act replaces some older laws that have been around for many years, like the Employment Act of 1965, the Employment of Young Persons and Children Act of 1933, and a few others. All in all, this law covers many important areas to make sure employment in Zambia is fair, safe, and in line with modern standards. Keep following along as we break down more sections of the Act in an easy-to-understand way. Let's start with the short title and commencement section. The Act is officially called the Employment Code Act, 2019. It only started being used after the minister in charge set a date for it to come into operation, and this was done through something called a statutory instrument. Basically, the law wasn't automatically in effect from the day it was written. The minister had to give the go-ahead on when it would start being used. Now, moving on to the application section. This part tells us who the law applies to and who it doesn't. Generally, this act applies to most workers in Zambia, but there are a few exceptions. For example, it doesn't cover people in the defense force, except for civilians who work for the military but aren't actually soldiers. It also doesn't apply to members of the Zambia Police Service, the Zambia Correctional Service, which is responsible for prisons, or those in the Zambia Security Intelligence Service, the country's intelligence agency. However, the minister still has some flexibility. After consulting with a group called the Tripartite Consultative Labor Council, the minister can decide to exempt certain people, trades, industries, or businesses from any part of this act by issuing another statutory instrument. This means that the law isn't set in stone for everyone, and exceptions can be made if necessary. That wraps up this section. We'll keep simplifying the key parts of the Employment Code Act in the next session, so stay tuned. Before we continue, just a quick reminder. If you're finding this information helpful, don't forget to click that like button to let us know you're enjoying the content. It really helps us out. And if you think we should keep making more videos like this, leave us a comment and tell us what you think. Also, make sure to hit the notification bell so that every time we upload a new video, you'll be the first to know and stay up to date with all the latest content. Thanks for your support. Let's keep learning together. Now let's break down the interpretation part of the Employment Code Act in a way that's easy to follow. This section is all about interpreting some of the key terms used throughout the Act. You know how legal documents have a lot of specific definitions, right? Well, here they explain what certain words mean, so there's no confusion. First off, when the Act mentions AIDS or HIV, it's referring to definitions found in another law, the National HIV, AIDS/STI/TB Council Act from 2002. Then we have terms like authorized officer, which refers to people like the labor commissioner or any other labor officer. These folks are the ones in charge of making sure labor laws are followed. Now, basic pay is defined as the regular amount an employee earns before any extras like bonuses or allowances are added. It's just the bare minimum pay. And if we talk about a casual employee, that means someone who is hired for short-term work, and they're usually paid by the hour or day, not for long-term jobs. A casual employee doesn't work more than 24 hours at a time. When we mention casual loading, this is an extra payment casual workers get, around 25% more per hour. And casual work is basically work that's not permanent or expected to last more than 6 months. Now, let's move to child and citizen. These terms are defined just like they are in Zambia's constitution. When they say court, they mean any court that has the authority to deal with these types of cases. Ever heard of a collective agreement? That's when employers and employees agree on things like wages and work conditions through negotiation. It's under the Industrial and Labor Relations Act. Next up, a contract of employment is simply the agreement between the boss and the worker. This agreement could be written, spoken, or even just implied. And by employee, we mean anyone who works for wages or commissions, including casual workers and apprentices, but not independent contractors or people who get paid by the task. An employer is the person or company who hires and pays workers, including agents, managers, or supervisors. And when we talk about an employment agency, it's a service that helps connect job seekers with employers. Sometimes, these agencies hire people and then send them to work for another company, but the agency doesn't get involved in the actual job itself. Employment relationship is a bit more detailed. It's when someone works under the control and direction of an employer, typically for the benefit of the employer, during specific hours, and sometimes using the employer's tools or equipment. This job could be the employee's main source of income. Then, there's a term called flexibilization, which is all about making employment practices more flexible. This could mean flexible working hours, part-time jobs, performance-based pay, or temporary contracts. Full pay includes basic pay and any allowances for up to a month, but bonuses don't count. And when someone works full-time, it means they work the maximum number of hours per week, usually no more than 48 hours. If someone is on a long-term contract, they might receive gratuity, which is a lump sum paid at the end of the contract. Immediate family refers to close family members like spouses, children, parents, and siblings. When we talk about hourly rate, this is the pay per hour an employer sets, but it can't be less than the legal minimum wage. Sometimes, jobs are awarded for justifiable reasons, which could include things like experience, performance, or length of service. There's also a labor advisory committee, which provides advice on employment matters, and the labor commissioner and labor officers are key figures who ensure the laws are enforced. A long-term contract is one that lasts over 12 months, and management includes the people responsible for running a business or company. Work done at night falls between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m., and part-time work refers to jobs that require fewer hours than full-time jobs. When someone is on a permanent contract, they work until they reach retirement age unless the contract is terminated for other reasons. The law also talks about public holidays and public officers, which are defined in the Constitution. Redundancy means someone loses their job because the employer no longer needs that role, and redundancy payment is the compensation for that. Employment is also classified as regular or seasonal, depending on whether it's ongoing or linked to seasons or peak business cycles. Lastly, temporary employment is when someone steps in to do a job for a short time, for example, when a regular employee is away. Piecework means you get paid based on the amount of work you complete, and wages are simply the payment someone gets for the work they've done, whether it's regular pay, commission, or bonuses. That covers the key terms in this part of the Act. As you can see, these definitions help make sure everyone understands what these legal terms mean in everyday work situations. Alright, now let's break down information about non-discrimination at undertaking and protection of persons with disabilities from the Zambia Employment Code Act in a way that's simple and easy to understand, just like we're having a conversation. First off, let's talk about non-discrimination at work. What this means is that employers must make sure that everyone gets an equal chance when it comes to employment. No one should be treated unfairly because of things like their skin color, nationality, where they come from, the language they speak, their race, religion, or even what they believe in. It also includes things like gender, whether they're married or not, if they're pregnant, if they have a disability, or their economic status. It even covers things like family responsibilities, such as having to take care of kids or other family members. Basically, when it comes to hiring, training, promotions, or even firing someone, employers must treat everyone equally. There shouldn't be any unfair treatment for anyone based on those things we just talked about. Now, you might wonder, are there exceptions to this rule? Well, yes. Sometimes an employer might need to take special measures to promote equality. For example, if a company is trying to hire more women or people from a certain tribe or region to balance things out, that's okay. Also, there are cases where a specific job requires certain skills or abilities that not everyone might have. In these cases, it's not considered discrimination. For example, a physically demanding job might require someone who can handle heavy lifting, and that's understandable. Another thing to note is that some jobs might be limited to Zambian citizens, or might be restricted for security reasons, like in the case of national security jobs. These aren't considered discrimination either. Oh, and employers must make sure that equal work gets equal pay. So, if two people are doing the same kind of work, they should be getting paid the same, regardless of who they are. If an employer goes against these rules, they could face a hefty fine. Now, about the protection of people with disabilities. Employers must follow the rules laid out in the Persons with Disabilities Act of 2012 and the Mental Health Act of 2019. These laws ensure that people with disabilities are treated fairly and are given the same employment opportunities as everyone else. This means employers should not only give them a fair chance but also provide the support they need in the workplace. So, in summary, this part of the law is all about fairness, making sure everyone is treated equally, and giving those with disabilities the same opportunities as everyone else. Now let's simplify the section titled Prohibition of Casualization and the section about Prohibition of Forced Labor from the Zambia Employment Code Act of 2019 so they're easy to understand for everyone. First, let's talk about the prohibition of casualization. Now, casualization is when an employer hires someone temporarily to do work that should really be done by a permanent employee. The law is clear on this: it's not allowed. Employers shouldn't take on workers on a temporary or fixed-term basis for work that is permanent in nature. If an employer does this, they're breaking the law and can get into serious trouble. They could be fined up to 400,000 penalty units, and that's a big amount. But it doesn't stop there. If an employer is caught doing this, they also have to pay the employee any benefits that they've earned as if they were treated as a permanent worker. An officer, someone who is authorized to check on these things, will look into the situation and decide what benefits the employee should get. They'll take into account things like how many hours the employee works every week, whether their work is regular, if there's an expectation that the job will continue, and whether the employer expects them to give notice if they're going to be absent. Basically, if it looks like the employee is working regularly, for consistent hours, and they expect the work to continue, the law sees them as a permanent worker. If the employer doesn't pay the benefits owed, it becomes a debt, and the employee can take action to get that money back, just like they would if someone owed them money. Now, let's explain what casualization means in simpler terms. It's when an employer hires someone temporarily for a job that should really be permanent. This could mean they're treated differently from full-time staff, or maybe the employer is trying to avoid giving the worker their rights, like leave days, a pension, or other benefits. The law says work that is permanent in nature means it's not a short-term job, it has regular hours, and there's an expectation that the job will continue. It could also mean that the role is crucial for the business to keep running smoothly. So, if a job fits that description, it needs to be filled by a permanent employee, not a temporary one. Now, let's talk about forced labor. This is also a big no-no. Forced labor is when someone is made to work against their will. The law says no one should ever be forced into labor. If someone is caught doing this, they could be fined up to 200,000 penalty units, or even go to prison for up to 2 years, or both. So, forcing someone to work is a serious offense, and it carries some heavy punishments. In short, these sections of the law are all about protecting workers. They make sure that people aren't unfairly hired on a temporary basis for permanent jobs, and they also ensure that no one is forced to work against their will. We've come to the end of our first session on Part 1 of the Employment Code Act of 2019 in Zambia. In our next session, we'll dive into Part 2, which is all about the Labor Commissioner. So make sure to stay tuned to our channel. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, so you don't miss out on any valuable information. This content has been simplified for you by experts at Research Expert Solutions.